libertarian socialism versus market anarchism, ethical nihilism versus moral objectivism, social change versus individual gratification. So what's going on here? Divide and conquer, but who's the one dividing and who's the one to conquer? I used to think that it was they who were behind this supposed conspiracy, but who are they? Are they not us? Are we not them? In some regards we certainly are, but in others it seems that there really is an us versus them. In that there can be seen some of the answers to my previous questions. We are dividing and we are conquering. Them is us, and in turn we are they. As in Buddhism and some other Eastern philosophies, there's a saying, this is that, and obviously vice versa. This hints at the oneness of all things, and I know it sounds like some hokey, New Age rhetoric, but there's a grand point there. I have always been a middle grounder, a peacekeeper, a pointer out of pragmatic solution. Even before I knew the word pragmatism, I've always strived to think outside the box. I have been an ear for a great many debates, and he said, she said type situations. I would say that I'm the type of guy to answer this debate. A group of my friends are sitting around discussing a theoretical problem. There's a squirrel on a tree that is hiding from the observer at all times by keeping the tree between itself and the observer. Should the observer go left around the tree, then the squirrel will go right around the tree, thus keeping out of sight of the observer. The question is, should the observer complete a circle around the tree, does he in fact complete a circle around the squirrel? Some argue yes and others say, of course not. The naysayers state that the squirrel keeps its face towards the observer at all times, and in this the observer fails to move from the squirrel's left to backside to right and then back around to the front, thus constituting or not constituting moving around the squirrel. And those in the camp of yes say having completed a circle inside of which the squirrel resides determines going around the squirrel. But is the problem not the narrow perspective or the wording of each party, or aren't they just talking about two different definitions of the same going round? In many sociological problems, you can exemplify this by looking at the dynamic between individual people. For me, I work as security in bars and nightclubs. And outside of fighting with belligerent drunks, this peacekeeping through diplomacy is the problem I face. It always boils down to that. I listen to one side and I listen to the other. One of the first things I realized in doing this was that neither side ever agrees with each other, nor would either side be what I consider to be right. Their view on their own situations seems to be the textbook definition of subjective. Yet, it's my job to make an objective case for a decision, much like a cop or a judge. Every person has their own take on things and situations, like what sports team is better and why, how to raise your children, or even what food tastes the best. There can never be an agreement on these matters, nor should there be. It wouldn't make sense to say that green is the best color in the world, even though I love green. Nor would it make any sense to say that Bobby should join the Peace Corps versus the Marine Corps. And I understand that's a loaded analogy. What is best for Bobby is what Bobby wants, even if he doesn't know what's best for him. Let him decide, and should he piss off the community in doing so, then there will be a communal response. Save that the community doesn't care, though I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a community that didn't care. And if they didn't, well, there you go. Now, this will allow for body to commit acts of harm against others. But doesn't that happen anyways? And on the flip side of this, wouldn't it also allow for Susie to become all that she wants to be or has the desire to be? There will still be positive and negative reinforcements. This always occurs. It's always been that way. But in this emergent law type system, these enforcements would be more accurate in response as opposed to the archon of non-situational law. If I treated every drunk person the same that was being problematic at my club, I'd be fighting 10 times more often than I do. Do you want to pay me for that? No. And what good would come of it anyway? Being able to have just one simple set of rules to go by so people could understand what is right and what is wrong. The people I'm dealing with either don't care or can't even conceive of this behavioral standard. And those whom I don't have to deal with obviously understand or care to abide by their own sense of utilitarian ethical guidance. Thus, not needing to know or research the rules. I don't go around telling every person in the club, if you fight or puke, you're gone. It's understood, these people understand that, and if they don't, telling them won't help anything. Now, there's some consideration that needs to be done for the outliers. Should there be a person who doesn't understand basic rules of conduct, and upon me telling them, they obtain some clarity? Let us count those cases against the others who would be unjustifiably treated under this one rule for all type of response. And let's see which is more pragmatically beneficial. As an expert in the field of security and dealing with dicks, I can say with pretty good certainty that the latter would be in way greater number. So if most people have a sense of good and bad, even though these things are subjective at the individual level, then why bother forcing them to adhere to objective standards? If one's actions don't harm another, then why bother dealing with them deontologically? But I'm getting way too specific, and it looks like I'm showing my colors. Though that's not what this video is intended for. Just because opposing camps disagree doesn't mean that they can't agree on some middle grounds. As much as they themselves would disagree on how to go about it, both the left and the right at least value freedom, just the same as I think nihilistic and objectivistic views do, can anyways. Even the most extreme nihilists want to have the freedom to not care. And if they don't, well, again, there you go. So for me, the real debate is whether or not you value social change or gratification of the self. Do you want to expand freedom or the lack thereof? And if you don't value freedom, I can't imagine you're going to fight for the lack thereof. Yet it happens. Why? It's the misunderstanding of the true problem, or more so the solution. Narrow-mindedness and not being able to think outside the box. So let's not put ourselves in said box. Let us not confine ourselves to one camp. They say that anarchists don't assemble, and I consider this to be a misconception, but in this regard, I would agree to disagree.